I'll get started, I guess. I'm doing something on Marcus Harris. Can you just talk about kind of what you're seeing from him day to day, but also when you're recruiting a kid out of the portal, he's coming from a different program, a little bit different level, how do you do that evaluation?
I think the evaluation process, if anybody tells you they kind of got it wired, I think they're probably a little ambitious. The things that we're looking for, the film, the first thing we're looking for is the film. We love film because there's no audio. You just get to watch and observe. So there's no what he is, what he isn't. It's just his actions are speaking. So we're looking for traits that we think are not equal to, but traits that we think are making us better. We're not trying to fill in the bottom of our roster. We need to move that roster up through I think high school recruiting, development. But we're looking for guys that can come in and make an impact. Marcus on film was around the ball a lot. He has experience, and he's got a trait that we are really excited about. He can flip and run. And he can transition, has quickness, and can stay attached, and he can transition on the throw. So those are the first things that we're looking for. And then we start digging into the homework. What kind of person is he? The talent, because the transfer portal is, I think it's buyer beware. I think you have to be very conscientious of what you're doing, and then making sure that you're digging into everybody's story, because everybody in that portal has a story. And it's not for us. We're not judging that you're in the portal, but we just need to make sure that there's some recommendations. We're not looking for saints. We realize there's going to be maybe conflict with I wanted to play more. I thought I was better. There's all those conflicts coming from staffs to players and players to staff. But we're looking for guys that have been contributing members of their team and not distractions.
And when you looked at him deeper than the film, what was you found out about him that you liked?
Yeah, we found a guy that wants to compete at a higher level, and that's I think what the transfer portal has provided for guys below the Power 5, or I guess do we call it Power 4 now or Power 5? What are we doing? The Power 4. Okay, so below the Power 4, they've developed, they've gotten better at their craft. And now they're looking for opportunities to do it against more consistent opponents week to week, and that's where he's at.
The defense had 3 interceptions today. Is this the first time they've had that many in a session?
Boy, I'm not exactly sure, because sometimes the 7-on-7s I don't really consider. It's 7-on-7, but I'm not certain. I know last year we did a good job taking the ball away. So we're always talking about taking the ball away. What we really want to do, I think, is when you get a lot of takeaways is when you're forcing fumbles.
It seems like every practice, Jair Smith's got a batted pass. Can you talk a little bit about what makes him successful on the blitz?
Yeah, so we asked those guys. You've been watching our defense for a while. Those field overhang guys, we asked them to do quite a bit as pressure guys, as man guys, as zone guys. Jair is a very talented player. I think he could play outside for us. I think he could play inside for us. And then we're just continuing to develop him to see, where I think he's going to help us the most and where he feels most comfortable. But, like you said, he's around the ball. He had a fantastic, I think maybe practice 2 or 3. He climbed up on a circus route, recaptured his leverage, and high pointed the ball, which was a very impressive play. And I think right now you're starting to see some of these guys start to separate themselves. From when they got here. I think there's a little lull about practice 6-7 when the volume, I think, kind of piled on them a little bit. Now you're starting to see some guys get more comfortable and separate and be able to showcase their abilities.
So the offense was supposedly completely installed by Saturday. How about the defense?
I like actually putting probably one thing in a day. I think it does something to the room. I think it causes kids to focus. Sometimes when we talk about, hey, we're just going to go out there and keep doing what we do, I think it artificially gives the kids a break. But when you say, hey, we're going to install something today, I think it's a good way of keeping the kids focused. So even if it's one thing or even if it's a tweak, I think it's important to continue. Hey guys, we got some new stuff in today, and I think when you say that, when you go into a classroom, hey, we got some new things we got to be tight about, I think that gets the guys perked up and ready to concentrate.
Are you guys scrimmaging on Saturday, and if so, what are you hoping to see from your guys?
I'm not sure. Justin, we haven't discussed it yet. With the quick turn on Friday, Saturday, sometimes we abbreviate practice a little bit on Friday to get some more work on Saturday. I believe we have officials, but Justin hasn't made that decision yet.
Going back to the portal a little bit, Have you been able to kind of streamline the evaluation process over the last few years now that it's kind of become the norm, or is there always going to be those opportunities and instances where you miss on some guys just because you don't have enough time to evaluate them?
Well, I don't think anything's streamlined yet. The amount of resources it takes to streamline that process is a spot I don't think we're at yet. Just the sheer volume, and I think you're going to see it here in 5 days. 5 days is going to flood. So unless you have, some indication of, there's going to be movement somewhere, it's hard to get in front of it sometimes. You try to be as proactive as you can. But what we're seeing is guys go into the portal, and there is it's just the amount of attention and the offers to get in the game is what I think people's happening is they're throwing offers out, trying to get guys on campus, then they're turning back around. And, who gets traction, then they're trying to dig back into them. But you're seeing, I think you're really seeing a shotgun approach when those guys go into the portal. You're trying to shoot those pellets and as many guys as you can contact, you get. And then once there's reciprocation, then you have to dig deeper. But to take the bullet approach and say we're going to identify one guy when everybody else is shooting shotgun shells, it's hard to get that attention because it takes you too long to fall in love with the kid, and he thinks you're not in love with him because everybody else is shooting shotgun pellets at him.
Any thoughts on the perceived effectiveness or of the expanded recruiting staff that you're saying added? How do you expect that to impact things going forward?
Well, I think it's going to continue to help us as we get people on board. We're adding some new people, but anytime that people join an operation or organization, there's training. It doesn't matter if you're being trained here, if you're trained at Apple. There's processes and there's identifications that we're looking for and kind of how our academic process works, what Justin wants to do with what type of people we're bringing in. We all need to be consulted as position coaches. So more manpower is definitely needed, but that doesn't, unfortunately, accelerate the training process of how we're having to do things.
So they don't have Marshall Charringtons and Benji Palouse just coming right out of the chute. Got to work their way.
I think a real common. I think some of those recruiting guys, I don't think they get the credit that they deserve, because I think the recruiting thing is maybe minimized as it's an opportunity to have a great personality and just smile and say what's up and give bro hugs all day. The behind the scenes of identifying these guys, of creating connections, of identifying the right fits, that's a very intensive process. And if you've ever been in, I wouldn't say hospitality, but if you've been in relationships and you're constantly making relationships, sometimes that's exhausting. You're speed dating 20, 30 kids a day. And that's exhausting. All the while you're trying to manage this roster, our own NIL, internal thing of how that's going on, and the discussions we have internally on those types of things and how we can continue to utilize it. Those guys are stretched real thin, and I think that what they're going to hit into right now is going to be a fury of activity for the staff and for the recruiting department. Thank you.